tango fiele aso muai amua sauni mailau pati malepo tupulanga samo mai efa afia fia efa avai samo ile atua long fasi no mangalela samo ailo uatu upele pele pe ilo waganga tupulanga samo mai efa fia fia mole au mai moa amane de la usiva mafali o winga tausa fia se mai ala ia tenge samo taulele ai ia meloa o ole samo o te mita ile vasa loloa
Matine Samoa ia emana tua malu e mafita o ainga ai mise o matua awa o soulu mana I manuia e mawai o ele fia fia ia tu mawile tu mafina wi melele e silile amo itamua tupulanga samo mai ai fa afia fia mole au mai moa fa amare ele elausi pa fa alio winga tausa afia se mai ala ia teine samo taulele ai ulia neloa Samoa o te mita ile vasa loloa tupulanga Samoa mai ai fa fia mole au mai moa amane de la usiva mafali o winga tausa fia se mai ala ia teine sabota ulele Neloa ole Samoa o te mita ile vasa loloa ole Samoa o te mita ile vasa loloa.
All right, welcome. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here this evening. Before we start our community conversation tonight, just want to give a shout out to all of our sponsors. Want to acknowledge all of our amazing sponsors that was able to make this 8-part inner wellness series possible. So if this is your first time here tonight, we have tonight's the final class for our 8-part series. So we've been having and hosting these conversations 7 classes ago, and it is not possible without our amazing sponsors. So big shout out to our partner with the WAVE program through Shoreline Community College, but not only that, through UCE Radio as well, and for King County Public Health for being able to partner with us and making sure that we're able to share this information throughout these different platforms. So we are truly grateful. Thank you for being here this evening. You could be anywhere else enjoying this beautiful weather that we have this evening here in the Pacific Northwest, but you are here. So welcome in. It is our final class for our 8-part inner wellness series. So it's a little bit of a bittersweet moment, but you know, all things must come to an end, so we can move on to greater things as well. So tonight's community conversation will be on cultural fatigue. What is it, and do I have it? Okay. So this conversation, we hosted for another partner last week, and we had amazing conversations around it. So I'm really excited to get into tonight's conversation. We just hope that you're able to engage with us. Please feel free to do so. If you have any questions, if you have any comments that is related to our topic for tonight, or if you want to share an experience, again, related to our topic for tonight, please go ahead and unmute yourself and feel free to share with us. Scarlett and I can talk forever and ever and ever. So please feel free to just, let us know that you would want to share or contribute to the conversation. We want to be able to hear from you. Before we start tonight's conversation, let me introduce myself. My name is Sala Afalava. I am a licensed mental health therapist here in Washington, and I see clients through my own private practice, but I also see them through partnership with other nonprofit organizations here in Washington that are able to refer clients my way as well. I'm also in school, and so just doing a lot of different things here locally. And I think probably one of my most favorite things is being able to have these conversations with our community. This is information that Scarlett and I share, are information that you otherwise would not have gotten unless you were sitting across from a therapist in therapy, in which you probably have paid tons and tons of money for. So we really wanted to kind of remove that veil or that barrier and be able to open ourselves up, Scarlett and I as providers, and open ourselves up to the community. So that way, whenever we have these conversations, if you want to chime in, if you have any questions, comments, or if you clarification on anything, we are here to address some of those things, some of those concerns for you. So looking forward to tonight's conversation. We will be monitoring the chat both on the Zoom and then also via Facebook Live. So please feel free to engage with us. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my amazing colleague, Scarlett, to introduce herself and get us started. Scarlett will be facilitating the first half of tonight's conversation, and then I will take over on the second half of tonight's conversation. So without any further ado, we'll pass it over to Scarlett.
Thanks for the handoff, sis. So appreciate it. Welcome everyone to tonight's community conversation. It is a love and a passion of ours to continue to impact our communities, impact the dialogue around mental health. And so these are some of the mental health topics that we, Sal and I came up with because these were the things that either we observed in our community or things that was met when we were in meeting with our clients. But just a kind of a small plug. I'm looking forward to when we do return, because we do have some new classes, so we are excited about that. And I won't reveal what it is because you got to come to see what it is as well. But it's truly thankful, truly grateful. So with that being said, my name is Scarlett Ekaroma. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a boundaries coach. I've been in this field for over a decade, currently work through my private practice, Elevate Healing. Not only do I get to see my amazing clients in my practice, but I get to do various community works independently and also with my partner in crime, Sala. So, and we are expanding really, and I'm grateful on not only expanding in the states of Washington, but really along the West Coast, and hopefully soon the islands. So I'm going to put it out there. But again, as Sala said, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. That's what we are here for. Even if you're in the Facebook Live, that's what we are here for. Take advantage of it. You have 2 licensed therapists who are here who will answer your questions to the best of our knowledge and to the best of our capability. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and set my screen up so that we can get this show started.
And as Scarlett is getting that going for us, if you are in the Zoom, if you're in a Zoom, we posted a what we call the cheat sheet there. It's kind of like a summary of tonight's community conversation. So little bullet points and little notes for you just to be able to follow along. We always want to make sure that, you have something to take away. Sometimes, like, it's not enough for us to just hear the information. We have to be able to, like, maybe write some notes down. It'll help really stick to our minds even more. If you're on the Facebook Live, I'm going to go ahead and put the cheat sheet there as well if it's not there already.
Awesome. Sala, can you see my screen? Awesome. So again, tonight's community conversation is cultural fatigue. What is it, and do I have it? We are going to have, and this, we're going to have a great discussion. Let me finish that thought first. And this is something like when Sal and I, again, we're putting this series together, when this is something that we just saw that ran really heavily in our communities. And our goal for all of the classes that we do is to discuss publicly what is often discussed privately, because the unfortunate thing is we would see our people suffer, and oftentimes really suffer in silence. So I'm going to share some feedback that we got in regards to when we just asked, colleagues and individuals, when they heard the word culture or the phrase cultural fatigue, like what came up for them. And their responses were really interesting. And it was just like, wow. And because it can be said across, various, BIPOC communities in regards to cultural fatigue. So some of the things that came up was, they were managing feelings of respect versus disrespect. Feeling like they always have to defend like who they were and and what their culture is. Then there was various degrees of pressure that they received externally, which then turned inwardly. Then there were the societal and familial expectation in regards to where the older generation was, for example, they just did it, didn't ask questions, whatever they were told to do, they just did it, versus the newer generation, they want to know the reasons that they are doing it. And the unfortunate thing is they were trying to manage expectations and really had a challenge with doing self-care. So they actually chose the cultural and familial expectations over themselves. And then there were often a lot of psychosomatic symptoms. So psychosomatic is defined as relating to or involving a concern with a bodily symptom caused by a mental or emotional stress or distress. So some of the psychosomatic symptoms that people experienced were fatigue, high blood pressure, insomnia, body aches, headaches, nausea, heartburn, and physical stress. And I thought this last point was an interesting one, where they said they always felt like they had to one-up someone or show out. So those were some of the things that people shared when they heard the phrase cultural fatigue. So this is our agenda for tonight. We are going to introduce and define cultural fatigue, and then we're going to go over the cultural fatigue cycle. Then we're going to break down each stage of the cycle, and then we're going to, as we always do, provide some self-care tips. And again, we love providing self-care tips because these are things that you can use with immediacy, and you do not have to wait to use them. So again, this is our agenda for the evening. And again, if you have any questions in the midst of what we are talking about, please don't hesitate to ask. Or if you'd like to share, please don't hesitate to share as well. So let's introduce cultural fatigue. So again, we always talk about culture because it is highly important to our identity. And a lot of it, of course, is keeping, we are big on keeping our native customs alive and relevant due to acculturation. So acculturation, for those who don't know, it's defined as adapting or assimilating to a different cultural norms, typically, which is the most dominant one, other than your native culture. So you're adapting to, of course, the culture that is highly dominant wherever you live at, if you're not in your native land. Of course, culture, like I said a little bit earlier, contributes to our self-identity, and it always impacts how we or the group behaves. It helps in how we express ourselves, our body language, and how we resolve problems. So my first question for you all is, what ideas or thoughts do you have when you hear the phrase cultural fatigue? So you can either put it in the chats, or you can unmute yourself and say it.
I think like one thing that always stands out to me with the cultural fatigue is when, because I think like we had defined it, right? We had defined cultural fatigue. But all right, I'll never forget the very first time that we shared this conversation and we were asking people to define it. And I think like I didn't expect the responses to be what it was, you know?
Yeah.
And it just it I think it opened my mind to think about like, oh wow, like this really does like kind of go in different directions. And one answer that stands out to me from that very, very, very first time we did this conversation is somebody said, like getting tired of their culture, right?
Oof.
Like getting
Yeah.
tired of like their culture, or like, and to the point where they were so tired of their culture that they were starting to not want to identify with their ethnic culture.
Mm-hmm.
And that was always stood out to me. So I'm like, oh, and I think that also helped us really really kind of break down the different stages that we will go into with cultural fatigue. But yeah, I think like just looking at it, the word cultural fatigue, I think you're just tired of culture. Like if I was just to go off of the name cultural fatigue in a literal sense, I think it's just like getting tired of culture. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like your ethnic culture. I think it's, you know, it's just whether it's culture in the workplace, you know, culture in your home environment, like whatever that culture is, because every home have their own, like, you know, type of culture that's there. But yeah. Someone in the chat, I think Facebook, was saying people feel overwhelmed with keeping up with our culture expectation. Yes. Yes. Say that. Yes.
Like let that resonate.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yep. People feel overwhelmed with keeping up with our culture expectation.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know,
That's exactly what I was talking about with how that other person responded. Because
Yeah.
that was kind of like what they were saying. They were just so tired of, you know, their like ethnic culture that and everything that came with it, that they were starting to now I'm not even identifying as Korean. You know, like I'm not like it's like almost like they're just like cut themselves off, which is like it's one of those things where it's like it's I think it's unfortunate because it's such a huge part of people's identity.
Yeah.
You know, so to be able to get to the point where you're shutting that off, you know, like, oh man, that's a lot. That's like it must have taken a lot to get to that point.
For sure. You know, as you were saying, saying that, when I thought about like if I didn't know what cultural fatigue was, one of the things that came up for me when I think of cultural fatigue is a lack of acceptance, like always trying to fit, and it's just like you're doing your best and you're trying to get in and you're trying to do whatever's asked of you, but there's still that lack of acceptance. So you just get, like someone said, there's exhaustion, that comes within that. And so I think the unfortunate thing when I also think of cultural fatigue is, I don't know why it always comes up for me, but it's financial stress. And so the financial aspect of it, and how that impacts just everything that goes on within you. If we're not feeling financially secure, that does impact us in some way. And so if the expectations is always to go out and not really in, it becomes exhausting and tiring. So does anybody else want to add anything? Is there anything else in the chats as well? We good?
Sina from Facebook says, like what it means to be a Samoan or Polynesian, the standards that are set by society. For sure.
Yeah. It's always interesting.
And I don't even like this, like what Sina said about like, what it means to be Samoan or Polynesian. It's almost like you can't be like Samoan enough, it's like, people are trying to do these things. It's like, oh, you're not
Yeah.
Samoan, or things as
Mhm.
like what she said about like the standards that are set by society even. And I think like that applies to like not just our own Samoan culture, but it
Yeah.
applies to all the different ethnic groups as well. That
Yeah.
type of that standard, because then that society standard that's there for
Mhm.
sure.
Because I mean, I even part of that when I think of cultural fatigue is also navigating different cultures, especially if you're of one ethnicity, you come to a whole different country, you have to navigate that whole culture within that because, for example, even though I was born in American Samoa, but I grew up in the States, so it was navigating those two worlds, and that can be because of course you have to present in one way at home and present one way at school, but it that can be tiring and exhausting as well.
Yeah, and then I could just imagine the people that are biracial,
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
multiracial people that are
Oh,
like
yeah.
identifying with different races. And then
Hmm.
it's just that feeling of like, well, I'm not Samoan enough, I'm not, I
Hmm.
don't know, Tongan enough, I'm not like
Hmm.
Hawaiian enough, so it's like,
Yeah.
it's just like that sense of like, well, I don't feel like I know where I belong, so
Hmm.
definitely that for sure. Yep, like what Emma said, it makes you feel like you don't belong here or where you came from.
Oof.
And Sina
Yeah.
says, yes, financial is definitely a part of it. It can definitely alter people's perception of you by your family. Absolutely.
Absolutely. For
Yes, Sina.
sure.
Yep.
And this is why
For
we did
sure.
our boundaries class. Because yeah, I think it's because of the because like I just think in particularly in the AA NHPI cultures, we are like Salah has said plenty of times before, it's like we are such an honor culture. And we always discuss about how do we honor culture and our family and ourselves to where we're not buried underneath all of that. Because the unfortunate thing, what I have observed and witnessed and also have experienced is family members transitioning from this earth because of the cultural fatigue, the cultural pressure, and it's just unfortunate, and that was very alarming, very very alarming because of this thing was more important than the actual person, which did not always, which doesn't sit well with me, if I'm honest. So I see Sina said the expectations of providing for the father love lovers can be really stressful for people. And if you can't provide, then it puts a strain on the relationship. Yeah. Yeah. We can go in a whole class about that. So the next question that I have, and it's just a rhetorical question for you to think about, is do you think you have cultural fatigue or know someone who does? So, and again, these are all good conversations that you can have with loved ones post class. And that's why we love having these conversations, is to intrigue and impact and have a different dialogue than what we possibly experience or what's currently going on in whatever part of your world that you're a part of. So next thing, here's the definition that Sal and I came up with in regards to cultural fatigue. So we defined it as extreme psychological, physical, emotional tiredness resulting from mental or physical exertion relating to the ideas, customs, and social behaviors of society, ethnic cultures. The key word I would say in that, in all of that, is the word extreme, because it's not that you can't, we're not saying you can't participate in whatever it is. It's just when it becomes extreme. Any questions? Sala, did you want anything to the definition?
Just want to emphasize on how it's not just like facing those experiencing those extreme in one area. Like I'm
Yeah.
like physically tired,
Yeah.
I'm like physically exhausted, so I must be experiencing cultural fatigue. I think like it's important to note that with cultural fatigue, it's experiencing fatigue in psychologically, physically,
Yeah.
emotionally, spiritually, even. It's just to the
Yeah.
point of exhaustion, feeling completely depleted. But it's not just in one area, or not just in one aspect of your life. It's in different aspect of your life. So
Yeah.
you're mentally tired, you're physically exhausted, you are
Mhm.
spiritually drained,
Right.
everything emotionally. I'm just feeling numb at this point, because I don't even, my emotions, I just numb at this point. So I
Yeah.
think it's just important to just kind of emphasize that more, how
Yeah.
it is extreme fatigue in
Mhm.
different areas, different aspects of your life.
For sure. And here's some of the negative symptoms that people can experience. So like we talked a little bit earlier, it's financial stress, psychosomatic symptoms. So again, it can be like the physiological can be like nausea, headaches, sick, feeling sick, high blood pressure, short temper, anxiety, depression, or insomnia. The one of the things that I have observed in regards to cultural fatigue or some of there's a lot of high negative coping strategies. So what I have observed is, for example, there could either be excessive smoking, drinking, or eating very little. And the big one is always or often I see is the suffering in silence. So, okay, I see Sina said, I don't necessarily have cultural fatigue, but there are definitely parts of our culture that I don't agree with, but I'm still respectful on the overall aspect of the Samoan culture. I love that. Thanks for sharing that, Sina. So, here is our cycle. Though we have this cycle, again, where we're going to go through each stage, it doesn't mean it has to necessarily go in this order. We just identify these phases because they were the most common experience when it came to our communities. And the thing about it is you may start at a different stage. You may not experience the stage at all. Or you may experience all of this in a different order. So stage one is motivation and attraction. Two is ambivalence. Three, strong sense of duty and obligation. Four is disillusioned and apathy, and stage five is burnout. So with stage one, the motivation and attraction, this is the phase where I always call it this is where there's a lot of bonding, there's a lot of belonging into whatever the community event or community, whatever the community event is. Because oftentimes in this stage one, but this is oftentimes where we don't see individuals we haven't seen in a long time. And so there's a lot of excitement that goes around that happens during this stage. So for example, these are some of the attributes that we have, because we come up with different attributes for each stage. So for stage one, there's a high energy level, excited to be a part of the cultural event, readily available and willing to go the extra mile to help with the cultural success, quickly and sometimes overly commit, and ready to make a difference. So in this stage, when we're so excited, we often don't think about what is all being asked of us, again, because we're really just either excited or dutiful at this stage. And oftentimes in this stage, we often think about the end result of the event, not actually what it takes to get to that end result. So that is stage one. Does anybody have anything they'd like to contribute or ask or have a question? And then Sally, you can chime in as well.
No questions or anything in the chat. But I always see this stage as like like our young people like wanting or showing interest in
Yeah.
learning their culture. And so this can be an example of that, where they want to learn the dances, they want to get the tattoo, they're attracted to the culture. They
For sure.
are, and like I said, culture, we don't have, I'm just using this as an example, but we don't have to limit it to ethnic culture. But it can also be a culture in your family, in your own home. But
Yeah.
I always see this example as like, with their young people, like they're at the point where, or not just young people, even I think, like if you've been, living somewhere for a long time and you're not really around a lot of Samoans, and then you move somewhere where there's so many Samoans and you feel so immersed in the Samoan culture or
Yeah.
Tongan culture or Tahitian culture or Hawaiian culture, it just makes you feel like, oh, like I'm excited to like learn, you know, like I want to know more about this
Yeah.
culture. So that's what I see the stage of, right? Like there's a lot of high energy, you know, like I see like, for example, like the kids, like they want to learn the dance, they want to learn the language, they want to do all of these things. So the excitement is there, the motivation is there. They're attracted to all of these different things that makes them unique in their culture.
Yeah, I agree with that because when coming from the South and then moving to Washington, I would say it was definitely a different culture shock for me because I'd never been around a lot of Pacific Islanders. And so in the South, like there, you would only see us literally because we were spread throughout when there was a major event. Like we didn't see each other every day. And so, for example, the high school I went to, besides my siblings, there was just only one other Tongan family there. So we were the only Pacific Islanders. So I think there was 8 of us in total. That's it. So to come to a state where there is um, a high population of Pacific Islanders, I was like, oh, this is different. So again, it was just like I do get excited when I see there is a cultural event and be like, hey, we're doing this. And I'm like, oh, when, where? What do we got to do? You know, how do you need me to help? Like, it's just exciting because it's just like that's something I was not familiar with in regards to growing up because my father was a part of the planning, not necessarily us. We just went to the events. So it's again, it's just this stage is stands true in regards to motivation and attraction. So does anybody else have any questions or I just want and we're good in the chats, right? Cool. All right, let's go on to stage 2, ambivalence. So ambivalence is defined, and you'll see it in here as well. But ambivalence is defined as having mixed feelings or ideas about something or someone. So some of the traits of this stage is, again, just the definition that we have, but it's beginning to have mixed feelings or thoughts after realizing the commitment required or needed. Question if you even want to participate, possibly begin doubting if you want to continue forward, or you may disagree with individuals a part of the cultural event. So in this stage, what I would say I have observed is always the traditionalist versus the modernist. So as I said a little bit earlier, it was the older generation where wherever was asked of them, they just did it versus the newer generation, they're asking why. And so there can be some contention that happens because of course the older generation is like, don't ask why, just do it. And so we've had interesting conversations about like how to find the balance in that between the traditionalist versus the modernist. The unfortunate thing, what I have seen is I have observed individuals or groups complain silently, not actually to who doing the event, because they lost the enjoyment of it because they were heavily exhausted and fatigued. And I've seen arguments, severe arguments, let me say that, that has happened in this stage because they didn't agree with whatever was going on. And what I also noticed in the ambivalent stage, that resentment starts to begin as well. And it's either resentment to like committing and realizing, like you said, they overly committed, or just resentment against like they don't feel like their ideas are heard. So again, that's why we call stage 2 ambivalence, because there's so many things that you can experience in regard to ambivalence. It just looks different for every person. Questions, comments, and Sal, if you want to add as well.
Just that with all the different stages, you know, just a reminder, like to everyone tuning in, like with all the different stages, like Scarlett said, they don't necessarily flow in that order, you know, like you go through experiencing things, stage 1, stage 2, like it's just a way that we set it up to help you conceptualize and understand what this can look like for you. And I also, with the different stages, these stages can be experienced like months apart or even years apart.
Years.
So you could be experiencing that stage one that Scarlett was talking about for years. You know, maybe you're like just excited to get plugged into community, and that's how you feel for years. And then maybe like, I don't know, 5 years down the road, you're starting to feel a little bit unsure about it. That's the ambivalence stage, because maybe you've been immersed in the culture for so long that you're starting to see things that you're not quite, agreeing with, or you're starting to question things. You're starting to have your own thoughts about what's going on, or the commitment, or the obligations that you have to do. So you have questions, and maybe your questions are not being addressed, which continues to leave you in that state of ambivalence. So just adding to it that like these stages can be experienced, depending on how you experience them, could be months apart or years apart.
Yeah. And and it's interesting because in any part that I was a part of any event, I would always ask, I need to understand the reasons we're doing that so that I can conceptualize what that is. And sometimes it's met with grace, sometimes it's met with just get it done. And so, and I love that you said that, Sala, that in regards to you can experience each stage either a short amount of time or a long period of time, because oftentimes, and that's the thing, it's okay. Like we said a little bit earlier, you may not experience any stage or any one of these stages. So it's just, again, these are just to help give you a guide in regards to tonight's community conversation. So any last questions, any comments before we go forward? Are we good? Okay. All right, on to stage 3. So let me go.
All right, so stage 3 we have is when people are kind of experiencing this strong sense of duty and obligation. So the previous stage was talking about ambivalence, and when you're in that ambivalence stage and you're not quite sure about things anymore, your questions are not being answered. So it leaves you in just like this uncertainty, sort of state. And so what that does is, what ambivalence does is it ushers us into doing something out of pure obligation and duty. Now, again, going back to the earlier stages, maybe something that started off with, passionate intentions. You are excited to get to know more about the culture. You are looking forward to learning more about the language and everything, like immersing yourself into it. So something that started off as like you having like passionate intentions is now starting to turn into something that's more of like you're just going through the motion at this point. It's getting to the point where you're just doing things because you've just been doing it. And you've gotten used to doing it. That's what a strong sense of duty and obligation is. Sometimes, sometimes this strong sense of duty and obligation, really what it's fueled by is it's fueled by maybe a fear of how you are being perceived by other people. Or maybe it's a fear of disappointing other people. So it could also be coming from a place of guilt or shame, right? So there's so much that could be fueling that. So with this sense of duty and obligation, you almost like I said, you're just kind of going through the motion, but you continue to serve and you continue to sacrifice your time, your energy, your money, and you continue to do it out of like, just because I've always been doing it. I don't even have joy in doing it anymore, but I'm just gonna do it because that's how my parents did it and how their parents did it. And, and here I am just kind of like, here it is. I don't have any joy when I'm doing this. I'm just doing it, just going through the motion. That's what this stage is, of like a strong sense of duty and obligation. Another thing I want to note about a strong sense of duty and obligation, that it actually can be seen as a good thing. Like having a sense of duty and obligation is an honorable thing. It can be, right? Like you think about, I was in the military, right? So I was in the military for so many years. And in the military, they really instill in you a sense of duty and obligation, right? So, and with that, you have so much pride in doing that. And even like, it's just considered like an honorable thing, doing this in spite of, like, I don't feel like doing it, but I'm gonna do it because it's my duty, right? So sometimes we can feel that way towards our culture. Sometimes we can feel that way towards, some of the things that we're doing, our obligations. So it can be a good thing. Having a sense of duty and obligation can be a good thing. However, if it comes to the cost of you, or if it comes at a cost where it is affecting you in how you function in your daily lives, like it's affecting your marriage, or it is affecting your relationship with your kids, it is affecting you in such a negative way. So this is where we say, okay, well, let's reassess that strong sense of duty and obligation that you have. Like, we have so many people in our community that we've worked with that have just been so stressed out from giving out of obligation, giving out of duty, serving out of duty, serving out of obligation. Like they've just been giving it, even to the point where they don't have anything to give, but they'll give it for the sense of duty and obligation, to where it is causing them stress. It is literally causing them harm, like physically. So with that said, like that's the point where we're like, okay, it's okay to have a sense of duty and obligation, but at the same time, you have to be able to find that balance. You have to be able to instill those boundaries. So that way the sense of duty and obligation does not continue to harm you in whether that is, because if you think about it, if you're stressed out from giving to follow Vilave after follow Vilave after follow Vilave, and you stress out from that, you could actually get a stroke. You could, like, medical things can actually happen to you, to your health, from being so stressed out about those things. And that's what we see in our therapy space from our community. And that's why we say, okay, you know what? We're just here to present information. We're just here to say, hey, nothing wrong with having a strong sense of duty and obligation about your culture, about, things that you feel a sense of duty and obligation for. However, if it starts to affect you in a negative way, then you might want to reconsider, or you might want to reassess that duty and obligation. And how can we still keep that duty and obligation in a way that it does not affect you in a negative way? And that's what this stage is. Any questions or comments? Or Scarlett, if you want to add anything to this one.
Yeah, every time you do this stage, it always takes me back to the story of one of my family members who literally had the strong sense of duty and obligation, and ended up being hospitalized because of strong sense of duty and obligation, and is no longer here. But when asking the family members, saying, hey, let's kind of take a break from all of that. I mean, in the hospital bed, saying, hey, he's saying like all the stuff he has to do. And it's just like, well, no. And I said, well, can we take a break? And he says, no, I can't. I have to. Like, I have to. And I'm like, why do you have to? Like, you're sick in the hospital because of all of that stuff. And he's just like, I can't, they need me, I have to. So that's the aspect of what Sala is referring to. Like, when the strong sense of duty overtakes your overall physical health and physical being, because even when sharing with that family member, saying to the person, can somebody else do it? And it was like, no, but I have to do it. Nobody else can do it. And it's like, and it was saddening. It was saddening that that person passed away at 47 years old. And it's just like, wow, it's unfortunate. So that's the impact. That's why we're talking about cultural fatigue, because we see the impact within our communities heavily. heavily.
Yeah. And especially when we're in a like our culture, and I'll just speak for a Samoan culture, that's what I know. But especially when in the Samoan culture where everyone has to contribute, and I think like you and I had this conversation, like back in the days, it was done from such a pure and good place of people trying to help people, right? But now it's almost like this sense of like giving to Falavilaves and things like that. It's getting to the point where like some families are shaming other members of their family if they're not contributing enough. And that's stressful. Like that's, I think about families that I've worked with that would rather give their last $100 to contribute to the family contribution for a funeral versus like, okay, well, we just gonna have to eat noodles for the rest of the week. We just gonna have to rough it for like till payday. So it's like it's that kind of stuff. Or I rather like give to my family funeral, family wedding, all the money gathering, rather give to that than, pay this bill. And because I didn't pay this bill, now me and my spouse are arguing about it. So now it's causing causing conflict in my marriage and my relationship because of my strong sense of duty and obligation that I have to do it. And I think a lot of that, like that's strongly embedded in us. And again, Scarlett and I are not here to say, stop giving to your Falavilaves.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious, no.
Oh yeah. Find the balance. Yeah.
Right. Yes. Find the balance. Find the balance and come to Scarlett's boundary conversation so that you can learn how to implement that balance. Because the balance, I think, comes from that boundaries. Like, how can you still give to your family Falavilave and honor that value while at the same time not like giving your entire paycheck and then you get to suffer. You and your family get to have, noodles for the rest of the week or something.
Well, I mean, it's even as you're saying that, like I had a Pacific Islander client where they would give it to the family event and also giving financially to other people's bills and not paying, like you said, not paying their own. So because of strong sense of duty and obligation. So then we were able to discuss a balance in that and find different ways that he still felt like he could contribute, just not at the rate that he was doing. Because it was impacting his physical health tremendously. So again, like I was saying, we're not everything that we've ever talked about in all of our entire inner wellness classes is how are we finding that balance with self, culture, family, and such, because you can find it. So that's why we always invite everybody to come to these community conversations so we can talk about these things and not have it be hidden any longer.
Right. And I think it's pretty cool that we get to just point out these things, right? And at the same time, like we're bringing it to the forefront, like, hey, this is what people are experiencing in the community because we see it in our offices. This is what we're bringing it out and we're having a conversation about it. But at the same time, we're not saying, let's do away with the culture, like we're saying like, no. How about let's just acknowledge that this is what everyone is experiencing. So now how do we still keep that value that we want to keep while at the same time, let's consider self. Let's consider your health. Let's consider, your marriage with your spouse so that you're not arguing because you have to secretly give money to the family Falavilave or something, So it's more of like, we're presenting some information. We're saying, hey, this is what we see. So let's acknowledge that. And then let's change the conversation and be like, okay, if this is still important to you, if it's still part of your value system, how can you still honor that value while at the same time, it's not affecting you or impacting you in a negative way. We can move on yet. Stage 4 is disillusioned and apathy. So this is the point where let's just go ahead and define these two big words for us already. Apathy is pretty much, you don't have that enthusiasm anymore. You just don't, you don't have that interest. So it's a lack of interest. You're pretty much at the point where I don't even care. Like apathetic about things at this point. So it's just a lack of interest, enthusiasm, which is such a huge, I think it's pretty much the complete opposite of that stage one that Scarlett was talking about, like motivation and interest, right? And you're like, you want to know, you're motivated to know about culture, about something. Well, now you're just at the point where you're just like, dang, it's not really what I thought it was going to be. Or you got hurt. Maybe you experienced it to the point where you experienced hurt in this. Disillusion is when you're just disappointed in something that you maybe found out that like it's not really as good as I thought it was going to be or what I believed it to be. So you have these feelings of disillusion. So stage 4 is pretty much like just a letdown stage. You're feeling a huge sense of letdown. You think about all the stages that we went through so far. One, you were like so interested, you're like want to get in there. You want to like know more about like the culture, you want to know more about what's going on. Then you had like after that there's like the ambivalence, like not too sure yet. I have some questions, but my questions are being unanswered. Then there's this strong sense of like duty and obligation, and now you're just at the point where you're like, you know what? I don't even care anymore. Like this, I'm just disappointed at this point. So that's what this stage is. And the thing is about feeling disillusioned and apathy in this stage is this is kind of where resentment creeps in. This is kind of where feelings of bitterness start to creep in because you're not having a good experience. Like it's a complete letdown. So you maybe resent having spent so much time doing something or participating in something or being a part of something. And now you just have a lot of resentment, and sitting with a lot of resentment. Again, I wanna point out that like with all of these different stages, you probably experience them like years apart or months apart even. You might not even get to any of these other stages as well. But just know that like even with feeling disillusioned and having those feelings of apathy, like this is you probably getting close to the point where you're starting to detach yourself from things. Remember that first stage where you're so interested, you just want to attach yourself to the culture. You want to be a part of it. You want to be in. Now you're at the point where you just kind of like, it's not what I thought it was going to be. I'm just going to go ahead and separate from this a bit. And also kind of where we see isolation. Like this is kind of where I see a lot of Samoan families, and I say Samoan families because that's what I've experienced and that's what I've observed. See a lot of Samoan families just completely like not even engage in any Samoan community. So they've just completely, shut themselves off, and they're just kind of doing their own thing individually as a family, so because they're just like, and a lot of it, like I said, maybe they're hurt. There's a lot of hurt there. This is where resentment creeps in. This is where just feelings of bitterness starts to creep in. Any questions or comments with this disillusioned and apathy stage?
I feel often at this stage, it's like a crossroads of whether you want to continue to participate. Like not even because you will complete whatever the event is that you're doing, but if you want to participate in a future event. And so I will say when I saw some things go down in regards to a Samoan event, I said, I don't know if I want to do this moving forward. I'm like, I committed to this. I'm going to complete it out. I said, but it was the unfortunate thing that I witnessed in that event. There was a lot of egos at play at that. But it was literally I lost a lot of interest, and I'm just like, just came in, do what I need to do, and then I bounced and I was out. Like, nope. And if they were like, hi, people would try to engage, but I was just like, man, I'm tired. Like, I just want to get this done and go. And I don't think I participated in another event for probably almost a year or two, is what I can admit, because of just that highly negative experience. And it wasn't that I was necessarily affected, but it was loved ones who were highly affected. And then how that impacted me because I didn't want to see them hurt. So yeah, this like I said, losing the faith and feeling disappointed is definitely, I would say continues to be accurate in this stage and what I felt.
Yeah. So it sounds like then, do you feel like with this stage that like that people can like come back from it, from feeling disillusioned and apathetic?
Yeah.
Because I think like, for example, like with your experience, you said like you kind of like went away for like a year or two. And then maybe coming back later. So would you
Yeah.
say like or maybe like just depending on people's experience, huh?
Yeah, I think it depends on what it is. I think for me in
Yeah.
that sense, I had to, that's the part where I had to learn like what were my boundaries in regards to that, and can I actually do whatever it is, and then also just recognizing like whatever's going on, that's not my stuff to carry. Like if in just recognizing like, because that was an emotional boundary that I had to set. I'm just like, because if the family
Yeah.
member wasn't going to address it, then there was nothing that I could do about it. Because they I have been told don't say anything, because for those who know me know I will. And
Hmm.
so I have been shut down quite a bit, saying, nope, Scarlett, I got this. Don't say anything. It's okay. And I'm
Yeah.
like, but it's not okay. You're crying. Like, how is that okay? They were just, I'm like, you're stressed out. Why? That's not okay. But I had to pull back and be like, you know what? That is how they deal with stuff. That's not how I necessarily would deal with it. And there's
Mhm.
nothing I can do. So let me just do what I need to do and go out. Because that was, again, me. And we'll talk about it in our self-care tip, like setting realistic expectations on that. Like their
Mhm.
stuff was not necessarily my stuff.
Yeah, I think it's comforting to know that people can come back from feeling let
Hmm.
down and feeling disappointed and losing
Sure.
faith. I think it's comforting to know that there is hope. And I think that's maybe, for people that are, kind of more like, like still want to get plugged in, like
Yeah.
still want to be connected. So like there's hope, like they'll probably feel hope. But the thing that now I'm thinking about is like there is hope in coming back from feeling this way.
For
But I
sure.
almost am wondering how many people come back and then they cycle through the different stages that we talked about,
Yeah.
right? Like they could
Mhm.
come back from feeling this way and go right into, okay, you know what? Give this a
Yeah.
second try again and going through that motivation stage again,
Yep.
or
Mhm.
maybe they come back and they're into the feeling like, they're not sure yet, or like,
Yeah.
oh, why did I come back? Why did I do this? So
Hmm.
it makes me wonder like, oh, I wonder how many people come back from this and then like
Yeah.
finds themselves in one of the different stages that we talked about, or like
Yeah.
right back into. But I also, something that you said, I think it's such a like good thing to kind of expand on a little bit, as far as
Hmm.
like coming back from it with healthy boundaries. I
Yeah.
think that is the key to being able to really manage all of
Hmm.
these different
All of that.
stages.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like, because
Mhm.
when you get to the point where you start to disconnect, like it's, and
Mhm.
people, and you are able to come back from that. I think like
Mhm.
the only way you're able to make it sustainable is through the implementation of healthy boundaries in all of these
Absolutely.
different stages.
And if you want to know how, rewatch our
If you want
boundaries
to know
class.
boundaries, come join
Rewatch
us
our
for our
boundaries.
boundaries conversation.
For sure. Yeah, I think because it's again, it's finding the balance, like we've been talking about, the balance of like how you yourself is just as important as this family event or cultural aspect, whatever it is. It's just that cultural part that we're talking about can't always be the priority, because it impacts you physically, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally negatively.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So good. We move on. Stage 5, we are at the burnout stage. Now, what you see listed here are symptoms. Symptoms that can be felt mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, culturally. So all of these symptoms that's on here, physical withdrawal can look like isolation. We talked a little bit about that. Emotionally, what that can look like is maybe feeling empty, having that feeling of like emptiness. Mental exhaustion can look like just that loss of energy. Sometimes for some people, it's even memory loss, temporary memory loss, or just feeling irritable all the time and just unable to feel pleasure. So I think about that stage of duty and obligation where you're just kind of doing things just because, I'm used to doing it. I don't even have joy or pleasure in doing these things anymore, but I'm just doing it out of sense of duty and obligation. So that's a sign of like just mental exhaustion, because you're removing your emotions from it and you're just kind of almost like robotically going through the motion. Having that emptiness and numbness can look like you're living on autopilot. You're not present. You're not able to fully participate in life. You feel you're feeling more like a passive observer at this point. When you're experiencing numbness, you're just kind of watching life go by. That's what that is. Okay. So again, these are stages of burnout. These are symptoms that can be experienced and felt. And remember that when we say, like, think about the definition of, cultural fatigue, when we get to this full burnout, all of these things are felt mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, culturally, in all of these different areas. Okay. All right.
It's funny when you said the memory loss, because I was in burnout. Because it's funny because people are like, you don't remember that you did. I'm like, nah, I did, because it's that robotic sense that it's just like that sense of duty and obligation just to get it done, and so and I've said the same things to others too, and because again, it's the full burnout, not even fully cognitively there. It's just, again, it's that isolation and withdrawal for sure.
Right. And recognizing then, like, if you're noticing that, it's like, oh, that's mental exhaustion. That's what that is, because sometimes we tend to minimize, right? We tend to minimize, like, oh, I don't even remember. I don't remember. And we just kind of almost like normalize not remembering things when it's like, okay, let's look a little bit more into that. I think that's mental exhaustion. That's what that is.
Yeah. And that's the thing, even though it's mental exhaustion, it still coincides with that. But I still got to get it done. That strong sense of duty and obligation, because again, in regards to cultural fatigue, it's putting that as the precedent and the importance over my mental exhaustion, because culture and whoever says I have to get it done or otherwise I will be perceived a certain way. And so, because a lot of times how someone perceives us, we can definitely have a class on that, can impact how we maneuver, like literally how we maneuver because that's the thing, those things impact various decisions in our lives, and not in just the cultural area, but all areas. And so how we operate. So yeah, burnout is and that's the thing, we have observed, like, people being burned out and still being, I got to keep going, I got to keep doing, not even acknowledging that they're burned
That's a
out.
class.
Yeah, exactly. Not even acknowledging that they're burned out. They're just like, but no, I have to. And I'm like, but why? Who says so? And so, and that's why in all the classes we give, self-care tips, because it's something that's within your control that you can start utilizing with immediacy. So, with that being said, let's talk about some self-care tips. Again, it's such an honor to be giving these types of tips, because again, like Salah said, we've emphasized before, like, these things you actually don't get unless you're seeing somebody like us in an office, a therapist, a licensed therapist in an office. So first self-care tip is set realistic expectations. Think about how much time you can actually contribute. Now, you setting realistic expectation may upset someone else, and we will have a class on that at some point of how to manage that. And so, but again, it's really what you have to think about in this sense. What is your capacity? Can you do one day? Can you do 1 hour? Can you do the whole week? What is your capacity at? And the reason why I say that, because oftentimes what I would see is people will come from a full day of work and be completely exhausted and just again get to burnout very quickly because of whatever they feel that they had to do. So again, in this sense, is set realistic expectations. Next self-care tip, make and take time for yourself. Choose a self-care activity that makes you feel rejuvenated, replenished, and rested. Key phrase is make and take. Don't just make it and not take it, because then we're still at ground zero. So some of the activities that you can do, and I'll put it in the chat, it's 50 ways to relax. Like I've mentioned it before. I'm a big cloud watcher. I fly my kite. It's not my son's kite, it's my kite. And so he has his own, I have my own. Smelling candles, reading a book, watching something comedic. So again, it's make and take time for self-care. The biggest instance in this is what I tell my clients is, I don't care how long the self-care activity is, just don't let it be 0 minutes. So it can be 2 minutes, it can be 5 minutes. It's just, you have to include yourself in your day, and you have to make time, and it has to be something that you do frequently and not less of. So again, make and take time for yourself. Next is use positive coping strategies to reduce negative coping strategies. So again, like I said, example, watching a movie, relaxing, taking a walk, painting, playing music, drawing, going to a comedic show, having some laughs with some friends, because often a lot of some of the negative coping strategies that I mentioned earlier impacts our physical health, in a negative way. And that's why, because I'm not going to say get rid of it, because that's not realistic, but it's like, how can we reduce that, and again find that balance. So again, using positive coping strategies to reduce whatever negative coping strategies that we had. So I've shared before in another class, so one of my negative coping strategies that I used to do was, I was an emotional eater and I exercised excessively. And so I had to find the balance to where I had to learn how to not ignore what was going on and actually identify what was going on with me. So again, I started to figure out what positive coping strategies worked for me instead of doing those two things. And then next is share your thoughts and feelings with somebody emotionally safe, or journal. Again, we're always going to emphasize somebody who's emotionally safe, because everybody in our life is not emotionally safe, and that's family included. So you want to go to these emotionally safe people where you can just share what's going on and let it out and not keep it in. And if you don't, and if you unfortunately, if you don't have one, then that's why we say journal, because all of what's going inside of you needs a space. We've talked about in our feelings class, just as much space that we give our positive feelings, you got to give the same amount of space to the negative things that we are experiencing as well. And we've talked about in our feelings class, sometimes you just need to air it out, and you just need someone to listen. You don't need them to fix it. You just need them to listen. So again, identifying who are your emotionally safe people that you can go to. Or again, if you don't have it, you can journal as well.
And learn to say no to things that you don't want to do. I think no is one of the most basic boundary setting word is no. And a lot of the times we find ourselves in, pretty tight situations that we have put ourselves into because we don't want to say no. Even though it is at a cost to you and your time and your energy and your finances, but you're still, agreeing to go along or saying yes to people for the sake of maybe duty and obligation, or just because it's that, fear or guilt. Even maybe they're guilting you into just saying yes or just agreeing or saying along, but you could save yourself the trouble just by learning to say this simple word, no. You can say no in so many different ways, where if you don't want to be direct and say no, there's so many different ways that if you come to our other community conversations, like we talk about different ways to say no. That is, you're able to communicate with someone while still maintaining your boundaries. So again, and I know people are like, oh, is that really self-care? Yes, it is. It's self-care for you to say no to things that you don't want to do. Because when you find yourselves in those situations where you're just doing things because you don't want because you have to, you'll probably end up frustrated, irritated, and all of that. Okay, so that's not good for you. So learn to say no. And then tune into your body. If you're feeling tired, if you're having stomach issues, or if you're having maybe skin rashes or something like that, pay attention. Like, if it's something that's never really popped up, before. Sometimes, like, when people are super stressed out, like, all of a sudden you see rashes everywhere. And you're like, why do I have rashes everywhere? And it's because, like, your body knows, and it's releasing certain chemicals in your body. Once you're stressed out, when you're feeling stressed out, your body releases chemicals that is, like, not good for you to have. So pay attention. Like, when you're noticing stuff like happening in your body, like you're having frequent stomach issues, maybe you're just lethargical all the time, every day, and like, pay attention to those things. That could be your body's way of communicating with you, like, hey, I'm physically exhausted. Hey, I'm physically tired. Like, you need to pay attention and take care of me physically, and whatever that looks like. Implement some of the things that Scarlett talked about. And then also respond from a place of values, not anybody else's values, your values. Like, it's such a difference, because sometimes we are so immersed in our culture, in our community, in our families, that we tend to take on, like, those values as well. But I think it's also important to know, like, what are your own identifiable values? What's important to you? And then whenever you respond to people, make sure that you're responding from that place, which is your values and what's important to you. Again, that's also where we go into, like, boundaries. Because when you set your boundaries and you learn to say no, you're doing it from a place of values, a place of what is important to you. Not what's important to your mom and your uncle and your, grandpa and everybody else, but, like, what's important to you, and maybe, like, maybe like your immediate family or something. What does that look like? What are your values? So make sure that you identify your values, and whenever you respond, that you respond from that place of your values.
So, question for you, Sala. So somebody who has a hard time saying no to giving to, like, a father love, like, what would you recommend how they can say no differently?
Yeah. So they can, like, if maybe, like, their family member saying, like, hey, we have to contribute. Everybody is giving $500, and maybe you're someone that's like, dang, I really don't have $500 to give. But, out of duty and obligation, I'm gonna have to give. I feel obligated to give, and I'm just gonna give. So I don't want to say no, because I don't want to disappoint mom. I don't want to disappoint grandma. I don't want to disappoint the family Matai, family chief. So I have to give. I can't say no. I think one way you can, navigate that is, one, if you know that giving to your family stuff is important to you, okay, then we'll say that's your value. So then what are some other things that are important to you? Because maybe you have a bill that you need to pay. And so that's also important, right? So how can you honor, how can you still honor, not say no to, like, your family Falava while at the same time pay your bill, right? So one way you can do that is you can maybe say, you know what, I've done my budget for the month, and you know what, mom, I can't give $500, but, I can give $200. That's all I can give. So that's a way where you're still giving. It may not be what they want or the amount that they want, but you're still contributing and you're still giving and you're still honoring that. But at the same time, you're not being stressed out, you know, by giving $500, knowing that you can only afford to give 200, you know? So I think in that sense, you can still honor, you know, finding that balance, like what we've been talking about, finding that balance and being able to like give what you can, not what everyone else is demanding and asking, but give what you can, what you have control over. And then at the same time, you're not stressing yourself out and eating noodles for a whole week and your lights are getting turned off. So it's like, I can still pay my bills and I can still contribute. I can't give 500, Mom, I'm sorry, but I can give 200. That's it. That's all I got to do.
I love that. Yeah, and that's I love that you gave that example because that runs heavily in our culture. And so, and that's definitely a financial boundary that I had to set with family. I'm like, and they know I'm the person who will only give a certain amount. And they, of course, they try to push past it. Can you give? I'm like, nope. I'm like, this is all I can give. And they know I'm good for that amount. And then they'll say, well, we know Scarlett will give this and then we'll fill in the rest. I'm like, cool. So, but it's still being a part of the culture. It's still being honorable. It's still honoring like our family name and honoring our family just in general. So,
and here's the thing, because this is where I can see guilt and shame come in, right? So this is where if you give and next thing you know, you're you know, being guilted and you're being shamed, you know, from your giving, like how do you think this person should respond to that, Scarlett?
Like if they feel guilt and shame about how they were giving, I think,
or like their family members are guilting them or shaming them, you know, and like, oh, this is all you can, this is it, like, you know what I mean?
Well, it's so, and I've helped some of my clients manage that. And I'm just like, again, it's that place of responding from your values, like you said earlier. Like this is, if it's either this or I'm not sure how to help you get out of it, but I'm telling you what I can do and what's best for me and my household. And because we live in the US, like we got bills to pay, and and they will come for you if you don't pay for it, and so the guilt and shame, it happens. It's a much deeper challenge and issue that we have to dig through, as to why. But it's again, it's that here's the thing. I've always said that somebody being mad at you, we all survive it. We all survive somebody being upset with us, and it's okay. And it's like,
it's okay.
It's okay. It's absolutely okay. And that doesn't mean you're less loved. Doesn't mean you love them less. Doesn't mean you love your culture less. You have to do what's best for you. And if you have a family, what's best for your family. This is all that I can contribute, mom, dad, uncle, aunt, whoever, because that's the thing, especially within the Samoan culture, there's always an event to give to, like always. So when you start thinking about how all of that adds up quickly, that takes away. So again, like Sala was saying, why she said, tune into your body, because our body, it gives us signals. Hey, something is wrong. I know you're not thinking about it, but I'm telling you something is wrong. So let's pay attention to what is going on with us. And so, like I said, guilt and shame, it's something, as we talked about before in our boundaries class, that's something that's really given to us to appease somebody else. It's a lot of times it's not our own guilt and shame. It's typically given to us by somebody. But again, it's still saying, it's just like sticking to that boundary. Like I can only do this. Like I'm unfortunately, I know I don't know what else to do, what else to say to help and make it better, but this is all I can do. And if they get upset and they don't want our money, then there's nothing that we can do about it. And so, because oftentimes we put people's perceptions as our own, and it's like, but what do you think about you? again, that what are your values? What's important to you? What's important to me is I need to eat next week, and I ain't trying to eat noodles and hot dogs every day. Okay? Or like Una said,
Or
mix and
butter and
butter.
rice.
Exactly. Butter, rice, and hot dogs with ketchup. I'm saying.
It's a luxury meal for
A
sure.
luxury. Exactly. So I think that's the thing, is just like knowing, being okay with what is in what you can give, not necessarily what someone wants you to give. Like, what can you really give? Because
Hmm.
too many times I have seen, and I love when Pacific Islanders come to my office and we talk about finding that balance, and it always turns out really well because we talk about how
Hmm.
can we contribute. That's not on, that's doesn't have to be financial. Like, it's always, a lot of times it's lately it's been going to, what I've seen is always been financial giving. And I'm like, is there a way that you can give that's not financial? And then we go through like ideas, and they're like, oh man, let me offer this. And then they end up not having to give financially. They give in a different way that's important to the whatever the culture is,
Yeah.
whatever culture they're a part of. So yeah, guilt and shame is often given to you by someone else. It's not necessarily your own, but also, again, responding from a place of your values of like,
Hmm.
this is what this is. It's so, like, if I would rather give little or what I can afford rather than give none. And it's okay. It's absolutely okay. That's what I would say to that.
Right. Well, absolutely. And also, I just think like having people understand that like they can't control how another person thinks and feel
Yeah.
about them, right? Like
For sure.
I can't say how many times I share this with clients in session. That's
Hmm.
like, does you could be giving 500 and they'll still
Yeah.
be upset at you for giving some, for maybe not coming. Like, you
Hmm.
can't control how another person is going to think and feel.
Yeah.
You could be giving 500, they'll still be mad at you and upset at
Oh.
you and find
Hmm.
something to disagree with you about. You could be giving 200 and they
Hmm.
might still respond in that way. But I
Yeah.
think it's that that drive in people to like please, or
Mhm.
to try and control how the other person is going to, oh, if I give 500, they're gonna think that I'm such a good son or a good daughter, or like
Mhm.
I'm a good servant to the family and things like that. It's like they might think that, they might not, who
Yeah.
knows, but you don't know that. So I think it's just for people to understand, like when it comes to saying no to those things, it's having to really like, you don't have control over another person and how they think and feel about
Yeah.
you and the things that you do. You can save yourself you know a lot of frustration
Mhm.
from from just getting that into your heart and understanding.
Yeah, I mean, because it's essentially what we're talking about is, and I think we've touched on this in other classes before, like not having, not love being based on condition,
Mhm.
and not, and truly thinking about like, okay, if because, and we talked about love and acceptances are great feelings, but it's just like, okay, how do we love and accept ourselves as well? And so, ooh, there can be so many ways we can go with all of that. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's always an interesting conversation, especially when it comes to culture, because we know it's a delicate dance,
Mhm.
especially since we are, living here in the States, and still wanting to honor, our culture, especially our native customs and our culture as well. Um, so yeah. So that is tonight's presentation. So did you have any last words before I close this out? I'm gonna stop
No.
sharing my screen. All
That was
right.
it.
Awesome, awesome. So thank you all for attending tonight's community conversation. So in the Zoom chat, I have put our survey link. Please fill out the link, fill out our survey, our short survey. It really helps with funding and how we can continue these classes. Again, if you go home today and you say, oh man, I have a question I wish I could have asked Scarlett and Sala, you can still send it to us. We will still answer it. We absolutely enjoy what we do. We look forward to um, coming back at full force with a lot more energy. We have been running these classes for a minute, okay? But again, please, because even on the survey, you can suggest classes that you would like to see as well. We are always taking suggestions. We are always love feedback to talk about what we can improve, because that's what we are here for. So again, we always want to give a big shout out to our sponsors. I believe it's Polydope, Big Goose Radio, Waves via Shoreline Community College. We can't thank you all enough for sponsoring this series, which started, I believe, in February and ending, wow, February. Started in February. And
Wow.
here we
Tonight's the
are.
last one.
Yeah, here we are in mid-June. And so again, we can't thank you all enough. Again, please share the replay to our to anybody who feel would be interested. It's also all on Big Goose Radio. So we can't thank y'all enough. We appreciate y'all so much. We look forward to coming back and seeing you all in September and from there on out. So with that being said, you all take care of yourselves wherever you may be.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.